I think a lot of us have known for a while that Busch Gardens Williamsburg was one of those parks set to receive a new roller coaster in 2020. And a lot of us even knew what kind, but now we have the official announcement from the park, so we know all the details of what to expect. New for 2020 is Pantheon, the fastest multi-launch coaster in North America. And they do have to say North America because it is not the fastest in the world. If you've ridden Terran at Phantasialand, that one is faster. But this one still is pretty good. Our max speed is 72.5 miles per hour, which I know that's kind of a strange and oddly specific stat. Why wouldn't they just round up to 73? And I'll tell you why. It's because Apollo's Chariot goes 73 miles per hour. And so they wanted to specify that this is not as fast as Apollo's Chariot, which is actually a surprise to me. I was anticipating that this would be the fastest ride in the park. This will be the second fastest, as it is half a mile per hour slower than Apollo's Chariot. Something that you might find interesting is where that max speed is reached. It is not on any of the launches. First launch, 36 miles per hour. Nice slow gradual start. Launch 2, 50 miles per hour. Launch 3, 61 mile per hour backwards. And then launch 4, 67 miles per hour. So your max speed is actually reached at the bottom of the first drop. And the reason for that is because this coaster uses the terrain. Your max height is 180 feet, but that does not mean that that is the same height as the drop. I would actually anticipate that the drop is bigger. However, I cannot confirm that because that stat has not been released. This coaster gets really close to the water. It does not go over it. So actually, if you're looking at this old drawing I released back in the original video I did about Busch Gardens Williamsburg's 2020 roller coaster, I had part of it going over the water. That is not the case, so just imagine that that is scaled down just slightly. In terms of what we learned new with this announcement is the launch speeds, the official track length, 3,328 feet, your drop, which is confirmed 95 degrees. That is the steepest drop in Virginia, which is awesome. Beyond vertical. I love it. And then probably the biggest thing we learned is the name, Pantheon. I like it. I think it's a great name. For those interested in knowing, the official definition of the word Pantheon is a group of particularly respected, famous, or important people. It is also defined as all the gods of a people or religion collectively. That is because this coaster has a theme to the Roman gods. And they've been teasing that from the beginning with Jupiter, Mercury, Pluto, all of the major ones. And so this coaster is supposed to be the combined power of all of them put into one. This is what happens when you use all of their characteristics. You get this coaster. In fact, they even have a diagram to demonstrate which god is associated with each part of the layout. This part I think is a bit of a stretch. I'm not sure how I feel about that. Like, I don't really see how each of the elements correspond with each of the gods. Like, I'm like, okay, Busch Gardens, whatever you want. But nonetheless, I think it's a cool theme, and I really hope that they theme this coaster well. It has a lot of potential. You might have heard of the word Pantheon before, and it not be from the use of the definition in this case. You might be familiar with it because the Pantheon is actually a very famous building. It's a temple in Rome, Italy, and it is very cool looking. I am really hopeful that they do the queue line or station or something to at least resemble this building. I think it would be a huge missed opportunity if they didn't do that. But we'll just have to wait and see what happens, because the specifics of the theming is one thing that the park did not go super in detail about. They talked about a lot of different things, but some of the things that I find interesting weren't really discussed. Like, if you watched the previous video we did about Busch Gardens Williamsburg's 2020 roller coaster, you will have seen how you will get to the plaza of this coaster. It's because you're taking a bridge over the train station. That part was not talked about at all. There was also nothing talked about if there's going to be a holding brake during the ride, because this coaster does have a huge spike. The spike, I was told, is about 179 feet, so it's almost the exact same height as the top hat, but we are not told if that's going to be a free fall, if there will be a holding brake. If I had to guess, there will not be a holding brake. But then also, if you look at the coaster that's supposed to go to Parc Astérix in France, that coaster is very similar to this, and that has a holding brake over the main drop. Because that coaster has a lot of similarities to this one, I'm wondering wondering, okay, does that mean that Pantheon will have that too? If I had to take a guess, probably not. But it's tough to assume because we don't have the official details from the park yet. So in my opinion, it would have been nice to learn a few more specifics about the coaster, but we did learn a lot of information, and so I am glad about what we did learn about this ride. We also got to tour the construction site, so we got to see exactly where the ride is going, at what point they are at in construction. If there is a downside, while we were there, we saw a lot of conflicting stats. Like some of the things that you'll see on these big billboards that they had out for us is actually incorrect. They're outdated, and so that just brought a lot of confusion. Another conflicting statement we heard is when it's opening. I was told spring 2020, but I was also told summer 2020. So I'm going to go ahead and guess that it is going to be somewhere in between those, aka either late May or sometime in June. That's how you get that win-win situation out of it. But because this is an intamin roller coaster, and we've seen how many delays some of their past rides have had due to them just being really complicated, I would not be surprised if this coaster has a late opening. If you look at Hagrid's Magical Creatures Motorbike Adventure and how complicated that ride is, that thing opened in July. If this is the point that Busch Gardens is at in construction, I would not be surprised if this coaster also has a July opening. Because one thing that is really complicated about this ride is that it has a fast-moving switch track. That is when they don't have to stop the train. It allows them to keep the full momentum going due to the simple flipping of a switch. The track slides into place and off you go. And that's really nice because of this layout. It has elements of a shuttle coaster without actually being a shuttle coaster. I have heard people say, okay, well, a lot of what this coaster does is similar to Tempesto. When I asked the park about this, they were very clear. They were like, this is taking what Tempesto does and putting it on a much larger scale. It is going to be a lot more extreme. That spike is going to be a very cool element, and that section of launch track where it goes back and forth has an airtime hill right in the middle of it. That was another thing that the park did not really talk about that I was curious in knowing, but it was quietly slipped in there that yes, this coaster does have an airtime hill over part of the launch track. A few other things that were kind of glossed over with this announcement. No one really talked about that outward bank turn, or the Top Gun stall, or that 90-degree wave turn the coaster has, like some really amazing elements that are going to be on this ride. Not really discussed. They are really focusing on the launches, which I do not think is going to be the best part of this ride. I mean, obviously I haven't ridden it, so I don't know for sure, but I would suspect that some of the elements that were glossed over are going to end up being people's favorite part of the ride. So that way, I do think that is kind of unfortunate, and I hope that they are discussed more in the future by the park. But as you saw, we did not get an official POV or off-ride flyover, any of that stuff. We just got this quick promotional video. You get to see the coaster animation in it, but not everything that I know a lot of us would have liked. But at least we see that it has a yellowish gold track color, a silverish or white support structure, and you can see that's 2 across seating, 20 people per train, that's 10 rows each with 2 trains. But in the end, to just wrap up this analysis, I think the park has a great ride on their hands. It really does look spectacular. I'm very excited to ride this. I'm very pleased that this coaster is coming to one of my home parks. I think it's going to be one of the highlight coasters to debut next year. Definitely one you're going to want to come out and do. But let me hear down in the comments below from you guys what your thoughts are on Pantheon coming to Busch Gardens Williamsburg in 2020. Hopefully you enjoyed this analysis. Of course, stay tuned for a lot more because I have plenty more analyses coming as more coasters are announced to debut for the 2020 season. So stay tuned for those, and I'll see you next time.